So, the consensus. Abu Hanifa, when he mentioned the unanimous rule about facing the Qibla, he mentioned the cardinal directions, north, east, south, and west. Not the relative directions, front, back, right, left, etc. So his quote is, verbatim, Al-Mashriqu Qiblatu Ahli al-Maghrib. East is the Qibla of the people, west of the Kaaba. Wal-Maghribu Qiblatu Ahli al-Mashriq. West is the Qibla of the people, east of the Kaaba. Wal-Janubu Qiblatu Ahli al-Shimal. South is the Qibla of the people, north of the Kaaba. Wash-Shimalu Qiblatu Ahli al-Janub. And north is the Qibla of the people, south of the Kaaba. So our case is that we are west of the Kaaba and north of the Kaaba. That's undisputable fact. People who argue, I'm trying not to say people who face the wrong way. People who argue for the wrong way, they would gaslight you as much as they can here. Meaning they will try to make reality seem like it's not reality. We are definitely in reality of the world. There's not alternate universes like we live in the comic book world. In this real reality we live in, we are definitely west of the Kaaba and we are north of the Kaaba. That makes direction south, yani south of east, but it's not right in the middle between south and east. Our direction is south of east. It's east southeast. That means closer to east. It's a little bit south off of east, not very much south off of east. That's for us. If you're in North Canada though, northern Canada will be more south because you're higher north. So that's the statement of Abu Hanifa, which is consensus. That's what all the madhabs go by. That's what all the Muslims have been doing until, what, 40 years ago in United States and Canada. And then recently after that, few places started to adopt that, like somewhere in New Zealand maybe, or maybe in Japan somewhere. But besides that, it is unanimous. This statement is unanimous agreement, and the practice of the Muslims has been established for centuries. No one did other than this. This is ijma'. And that refutes those people who say they following Abu Hanifa school, and Abu Hanifa school gives you so much room for error. You have so many degrees for error in Abu Hanifa school. They're misapplying Abu Hanifa school. In the USA and Canada, we are west of the Kaaba, for sure. How we know? Because the sun rises at the Kaaba before it rises here. The religious evidence tells us that the sun rises in the east. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْتِي بِالشَّمْسِ مِنَ الْمَشْرِقِ. Allah brings the sun from the east. The sun rises at the Kaaba before it rises here. We're west of the Kaaba. Nobody disagrees with that. So our Qibla cannot be also west. If we're west of the Kaaba, we can't face west too. We have to turn the opposite way, which is eastward. Nobody disagrees with that part though. And contrary to an uneducated opinion, we are also indisputably north of the Kaaba, because the North Star is higher where we are than it is at the Kaaba. So our Qibla cannot also be north. It must be some degree to the south. So some people who argue for northeast are going to say, you want to face southeast from here, that means you're going to be facing South Africa. No, it doesn't mean that. Those same ones who are going to say you don't know geography are ignoring the fact that southeast covers everything between south and east. We're not saying it's just due southeast. It's east southeast. That means closer to east. It's a little bit south from east. That's our Qibla, where we are. But if you are in northern Canada, then you're going to have more south in your Qibla than we are. If you're in Florida, you're going to have less south in your Qibla than we have. Closer, way closer to east if you're in Florida, but still southeast. Yani, east-southeast. Yes? Yes. Meaning, though, Because the sun rises, since the sun rises from the east and it rises at the Kaaba before it rises here. So if the sun rises at the Kaaba before it rises here, that means Kaaba is east of us. Go ahead. Is higher in the sky. Yeah. The higher the North Star is, the higher you can see the North Star, that means the more northern you are, the further north you are from the equator. The Kaaba is way closer to the equator than we are. Equator is called in Arabic Khattul Istiwa. The Kaaba is way closer to the equator than we are. The North Star at the equator is lower in the sky. That means closer to the horizon than you would see it where we are. Undisputable facts. So the religious evidence, traditional fiqh method, which what we're following is traditional fiqh. Nothing we are saying is against any traditional fiqh. People who are arguing with what we're saying, they're basically arguing with the Shafi'i school and the Maliki school and the Hanafi school, really. But they're going to try to act like, no. Maliki school allows for us to face northeast here, and Hanafi school allows for us to face northeast here, and that's not true.
What's the proof?
What's the proof for what?
Of them saying that.
For them to say that? They don't have any proof for that. They have a claim. One person claimed in the discussion I had, they said to me, you don't know the Maliki school. The Maliki said you don't have to consider east and you don't have to consider north and south. You can just consider east and west only. So that's their claim. They have no document for that, and I'd like for them to produce their documents. Don't be afraid to tell those people to produce their documents. But most of the time what the people say is, well, according to the Hanafi school, you have such and such room for error. So in the Hanafi school, if you did face northeast from our position, it's still going to be valid because you have a wide degree to be able to turn in Hanafi school. And they're misapplying that, though. They're not applying that Hanafi school properly here, because the Hanafis say that you have to face the most accurate direction. They didn't say you can just be loose and follow. You can just turn anywhere within 45 degrees as you wish. That's basically what they're saying. They're saying Hanafi school give you 45-degree angle. That's wide angle. So what they're saying is, their interpretation of that is, you can just be as loose as you want to be within those 45 degrees. According to Hanafi school, that's untrue. The Hanafi school is that you must face the most accurate direction. If you turn away from what you believe to be most accurate, then your prayer is invalid in the Hanafi school. Yeah. If you turn away from what you believe to be the most accurate direction, your prayer is invalid according to the Hanafi school. So what they're saying is, look, you know how a circle is 360 degrees. They say a circle is 360 degrees. If you cut a circle in half a circle is 180 degrees. That means you're turning the opposite direction. Then if you cut that in half, that's 90 degrees. So that's basically, if you just turn all the way to your right or all the way to your left, that's 90 degrees. So they say if you cut that in half, that's 45 degrees. They're saying Hanafi school gives you 45 degrees room for error. You can face anywhere within 45 degrees of the Kaaba according to Hanafi school. That's what they claim. They are misapplying the Hanafi school here, because the Hanafi school says that you must face what is the most accurate direction. If you intentionally turn away from what is the most accurate direction, then your prayer will be invalid even if you wound up facing the Kaaba. If you turn away from what you think is the most accurate direction in the Hanafi school, then your prayer will be invalid even if you wound up facing the Kaaba. And that's the same rule in Shafi'i school and Maliki school. We have the document. It'll come inshallah. So according to traditional fiqh, the fact that the North Star is higher in the sky here, where we are, than it is at the Kaaba, means that we have to turn some degree south. That's traditional fiqh. And that's knowledge even a Boy Scout would learn. Or a soldier, for example. Or a sailor. That's the way it is. Those people really are ignoring the North Star altogether. They won't even bring up the North Star if you don't bring it up. The people who argue for Northeast. Although the North Star is the strongest Qibla sign by consensus. وَبِالنَّجْمِ هُمْ يَهْتَدُونَ. By the star, they are guided. The star here is either the North Star itself, or the star here means the star is a type of thing. But then the North Star is the most reliable star, according to everyone. Everyone, yani all the schools, anyone who knows about looking at stars. North Star is the most reliable star. Meaning that it's always in the same place. It does have slight movement, the North Star, but very slight. Doesn't matter. These obvious elementary truths must be stated because Northeasters, meaning those who argue for Northeast, not the people who are just following out of, following blindly and facing Northeast because that's how many, they saw so many people doing that and because their imams told them to do that, but they don't know anything. Here, we're most angry here at the people who argue for this. They say that we should not turn any degree south of east from United States or Canada. They say because there's a curve in the earth, we must turn north of east. That's incorrect. We already said last time that the shape of the earth doesn't influence directions. This is indeed a legal consensus, but based on an ancient rule, not based on some people's choosing to abandon that rule and deny the consensus. Our issue here in the United States and Canada is not a matter of ikhtilaf, valid ikhtilaf. Some people said, we made our ijtihad, we came to Northeast. You made your ijtihad, you came to Southeast. It's just ikhtilaf. No, Northeast is invalid. Kaaba is not northeast of us in any way whatsoever. The Qibla of USA and Canada is only south of east, with varying degrees of south, from northern Canada to southern USA. From northern Canada to southern USA, it's all east and with varying degrees of south depending on where you are. All the way down to Florida. It's still going to be south of east, but very little bit off of east, south. The south in Florida is going to be very little bit off of east, very little bit. Due east itself would not be the Qibla in North America until getting into Mexico. And northeast is the Qibla of a portion of Mexico, and northeast is the Qibla of Central and South America.
So shit.
Yeah.
I've heard this from someone from Argentina. I don't know.
That's incorrect. That's not the rule. And there shouldn't be an argument about it. Rather, you just face you follow the rules. So you say, for example, where does the sun rise first? Here or there? Whichever way the sun rises first, then that's east. That's east of the other place. And you say to yourself, or even in your discussion, where is the North Star higher? Here or there? Whichever way the North Star is higher, whichever place the North Star is higher, then that's the place that's north of the other. So if you're west of the Kaaba because the sun rises there first, then you need to turn to the east. If the North Star is higher where you are than it is at the Kaaba, that means you have to face south to some degree. That's proper rules. So why would there even be an argument there if you just follow the right rules that anybody can do? Even if you can't read, you can do that. Yeah, that's incorrect. Because that's not the rule. You're supposed to go by the rule. So the legal consensus that south is the Qibla when you are north of the Kaaba, that was followed by all the Muslims since the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first Muslims in North America knew that they were north and west of the Kaaba, so they faced east and then south. Then, no matter the reason, the people of North America, United States and Canada in particular, they defied that old rule only recently in the 70s, and then they denied that there was ever any consensus about north and west of the Kaaba, about being north and west of the Kaaba. Imam al-Haramain said, وَالْإِجْمَاعُ حُجَّةٌ عَلَى الْعَصْرِ الثَّانِي وَفِي أَيِّ عَصْرٍ كَانَ. The consensus is evidence for the following era and for any era to come. Once there's a consensus, you can't go against it. So they are gaslighting the people, saying there is not even any consensus here. There never was a consensus. There is a consensus since the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you are north of the Kaaba, then you face towards the south. If you are west of the Kaaba, then you face towards the east. We must follow the same rule that existed for over a millennium, over 1,000 years. It applies to us also. And there is no actual evidence to disprove the Southeast Qiblah. They simply prefer not to use the traditional rules for facing the Qiblah, because those rules would lead one to face southeast. But they do have arguments against Southeast Qiblah, which is basically arguing against the madhabs. That's why the people who argue for northeast are anti-madhab in this issue. This boils down to that simple matter that I told you. You say to the person, where does the sun rise first? Here or the Kaaba? If he says, I don't know, tell him, then you're not qualified even for this discussion. If he says the Kaaba, you say, okay, where is the North Star higher? Here or at the Kaaba? If he says, I don't know, tell him, you're not qualified for this discussion. So if he says it's higher here, you tell him, okay. So if the North Star is higher in one land than it is in another land, which one is north of the other? If he says, I don't know, you tell him you're not qualified for this discussion. If he says whichever one has the higher, whichever one where the North Star is higher, that's the one that's north of the other. Tell him, okay. If you're north of the Kaaba, which direction you're supposed to face? They're going to, when he's stubborn, he's going to say, you still have to face northeast though, because, and then he's going to go on a tangent. And again, if he says, I don't know, so you're not qualified for this discussion then. That's like somebody trying to argue with you about how to make wudu. And you tell him, so what are we supposed to use for wudu? He says, I don't know. Tell him, you don't know, what are you doing arguing? You have no idea. You're not even qualified for this discussion.
Then you're further north.
If the North Star is higher where you are than it is at the Kaaba,
Okay.
that means that you are north of the Kaaba. If the North Star is higher at the Kaaba than it is where you are, that means the Kaaba is north of you. They either do not care or they deny that arguing against Southeast is actually a refutation of the Sunnah. They do not deny that their method of determining the prayer direction is new. They rather thought that they were entitled. They rather thought that they were entitled to use a new method because they live in North America. But put in their own words, it's because they live on the other side of the world. However, the Muslim belief is that the Sunnah is applicable all over the world and until the end of time. Allah says, الْيَوْمَ أَكْمَلْتُ لَكُمْ دِينَكُمْ وَأَتْمَمْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعْمَتِي وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا. This is the third verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah. It proves that our religion was complete before the Prophet died, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this religion was approved by Allah. It means today, meaning when this verse was revealed, I have completed your religion for you, and I have completed my endowment upon you, and I have approved of Islam for you as a religion. Wabillahi tawfiq. We'll stop there, inshallah ta'ala.
The first Muslims of the U.S. and Canada, they pray southeast.
Absolutely, with no difference here. The people who face Northeast will not deny that when the Muslims were first here in the United States and Canada, they faced Southeast and they buried their dead Southeast.
They buried their dead southeast.
Yes. The Qiblas were Southeast and they buried their dead Southeast. They will not deny it. If someone did by chance deny it, then he's just stubborn or he's ignorant. That's known fact. They changed the Qibla from Southeast to Northeast. They changed it. It wasn't like that always.